Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another IATEFL Live, and it's a chance to meet another one of our plenary speakers today. So welcome. Hope you're all settled in to meet another speaker. My name's Sean Wilden, and as you probably know by now, if you've joined us, we run these IATEFL Lives very frequently. And at the moment, we're concentrating on our Belfast conference, which is getting ever closer. I think we were just counting it that it was just over 30 odd days to go now, which seems amazing when you're planning it. And I've just seen one of the people in the live stream put their heads in their hand because it's 30 days to finish the planning. If you are not sure then what we're talking about, then it's the IATEFL Belfast Conference 2022, and it will be our first face-to-face conference for a couple of years. And we're looking forward to welcoming people back to a face-to-face IATEFL. The conference itself is running from the 17th to the 20th of May this year, and of course there is the day before, the 16th of May, are the pre-conference events. So if you are looking at the information on the website, you can sign up for the conference and join the conference as well as the pre-conference events. And you can see that we've now put a date on that. The closing date for signing up for conference this year is May the 5th. Okay, so you've got until May the 5th to get yourself signed up for conference and get your trip planned, and we're very much looking forward to seeing you there. And if you're still not sure, even after all these little live streams that we've been doing and all the information we've given you, you now, of course, can actually see the program. The program went live on Friday, which is a very exciting moment. So you can go to conference.iatefl.org and you will be able to find a digital version of the program. And you can see the extent of an IATEFL conference. If you've never been before, these things are huge. There are so many talks and so many things to see and do during the 3 days or 4 days of the conference. So you can go to conference.iatefl.org and you can find the program. You can find at that website. You can also find out lots more information. And as I say, today is a chance to meet another of our plenary speakers, and I'm very pleased to welcome them to the live stream. I'm just looking down below, see if Nikki's there, Nayr is there. Let's add everybody in. Hiya, how you doing? Oops, got to remove that. Good afternoon, folks. Are you ready? So I'm going to hand over to Nikki, who's going to take us through and let us find out more about today's plenary speaker.
Oh, lovely. Sean, thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. As Sean said, my name's Nikki, and I'm delighted to be joined here this afternoon by our opening plenary speaker on Tuesday, the 17th of May, and that's Dr. Nayr Ibrahim. Hello, it's lovely to meet you.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me to be here with you today.
Oh, it's lovely, and thank you for taking the time to join us. So Nayr, I was looking through your profile, and you have had a very varied and interesting journey in ELT, and I thought it would be interesting if you could just tell us a bit about yourself and the countries and places that you've been to and things that you've done, and how you ended up where you are now currently.
Right, gosh, starting where?
The beginning.
The beginning. So, yes, I think perhaps what we should do is if we look at the globe, I started down here and I've ended up here, right? Because at the moment I'm in Norway, and I'm working at Nayr University in the Faculty of Education. So I'm working with teachers, both pre-service and in-service teachers. And basically teaching them how to teach English to both children in primary and teenagers, so grades 1 to 10, that age range. But yeah, before I got here, it's been quite a journey. So up the globe, up towards the north. So born in South Africa, and always quite interested in languages because I was sort of born into this multilingual context. That was South Africa, first of all, but also an immigrant context in South Africa, where you had like a home language plus other languages in the community and in school, etc. And then I, after my studies, I worked for a bit in South Africa, and I was trying to find my life, trying to find, my path. And I thought, well, let me try Europe, because I sort of had a base in Europe, and that's Portugal, because my parents are Portuguese. And that's actually where my career started. My EFL career started. I had studied languages and literature at university in South Africa. So I did an honours degree in French and Portuguese language and literature, which was great. I also did 3 years of English literature. And then when I got to Portugal, there was a need for English teachers. And I started working in local schools. Back then, this was the 90s, and obviously back then I was into like the teaching adult thing. I wanted to teach adults. I didn't want to teach children, you see. I wanted to teach adults. And I kept being thrown into children's classes. I was always given young learner classes. And as young as the first youngest class that I taught was in Portugal, and it was for 5-year-olds. Now, it's interesting because even though at first I was resisting it, I was at the same time absolutely loving it. So, so you guys are, this is so much fun, great. And then we also had the whole thing of, I had trained as a CELTA teacher. So, and CELTA at the end, it says A for adult. So teaching adults was, I had all those skills, all those strategies, all the techniques that you learn in the CELTA. And then suddenly, when you're actually in a young learner class and you're using those techniques, they don't work because children don't respond in the same way as adults do. The CELTA, that training is for teaching adults and for teaching individuals that play the game. Okay, I'm in a classroom, I'll behave, I'll do what my teacher says, etc. It's not the same with children. So, and then, so that sort of started opening my eyes to the difference in, teaching adults and teaching children. And it wasn't only about teaching children. I was teaching teenagers and children and 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds. And all of those different levels and age groups are so different. They demand such different strategies and techniques and approaches. So it sort of opened this incredible world of, pedagogy or age-appropriate pedagogy for children, which I then continued in France. And I think that's really where my teaching of young learners, that's where I consolidated and really developed my ability and my career, really, in working with young learners. So I worked for the British Council. I started working for the British Council in Portugal, and then worked for the British Council in Paris for 20 years. So that was that was my time in Paris, actually, 20 years in Paris and 20 years working for the British Council in Paris. And I had an incredible journey there. I mean, it will always be, it sort of made me who I am today and, contributed to what I do today, I think.
Can I just ask, in terms of actually teaching the younger learners, was it advantageous that you'd done Portuguese and French for bachelors? Did it help at all, or was it not necessary?
Well, back then, it is now. It's really interesting how things have evolved. And back then, the fact that I was Portuguese was something we needed to hide, was something we needed to ensure the parents never found out that I had these other languages, and that especially in Portugal. So when I started teaching, I remember this one experience where I was teaching, I think, a group of 9, 10-year-olds, and the parent wanted to come and talk to me about the students. And I had the secretary sitting between me and the parent translating. And I just found this absolutely hilarious. I was understanding everything they were saying, but I had to just play the game and pretend that I was just South African and not Portuguese. Because so I spent quite a lot of my time in those first years hiding. So I would always foreground the fact that I was South African, because that justified my being an English teacher. It justified my being in that classroom with the children, and the parents were then would accept me as, that native language, the English language teacher, until I also noticed, and I have my colleagues in Paris to thank for this. My colleague and friend, Gail Ellis, she was introduced me as, oh, this is Nayr Ibrahim. She's, from South Africa, but she's also Portuguese. I thought, oh, we're actually telling parents that I've got all these backgrounds. And then it suddenly became okay. And then I sort of realized, well, hold on a minute. Why do I have to hide who I am now? And now with this focus on multilingualism and on acknowledging children's languages in the classroom, and now with a push to actually not just acknowledge, but make them more visible and use children's languages in the learning process, that's the first thing I do when I introduce myself as a teacher educator of future English language teachers is, this is who I am, this is my language map, these are the number of languages I speak, and this is my background. And I mean, the message here is that you don't have to be from England or the UK to teach English. You don't have to be that so-called native speaker, because even applying that term to me is a bit strange, because yes, I may be a native speaker because I was born in South Africa, but actually English is not my mother tongue. So I think that's such an important message to give future English language teachers, and also in order to make them feel more confident about their ability and about their own professional identity as English teachers.
So 100%. Yeah, I agree. 100%.
So now those languages that you mentioned earlier come into play all the time. I bring them into my teaching all the time. I will, I have this wonderful picture book, a Portuguese picture book that I use to teach my students, my Norwegian teachers of English, Portuguese colours, and I use that as an activity to show teachers how they can actually introduce new vocabulary into the classroom. So I think those languages now are so useful in my own English language teaching. So you can see how it's interesting, how it's evolved. And I'm really glad, it's really important that we have evolved from that time when I was like, we were all trying to hide the fact that I was Portuguese, to actually just acknowledging it and using it in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad there has been the shift in mentality to actually recognise and realise that the non-nest is, effectively probably maybe a better teacher than the native speaker in terms of, what they can bring and the anticipated problems that they can foresee. So, yeah, I think it's fantastic. Okay, so you said you're in teacher education at the university. So which courses do you teach? Because your research interests are very varied and very interesting.
Yeah. I think my main focus obviously is teaching English, so English pedagogy. So how do you teach English to young learners, or to primary students and to secondary students, and using, looking at all the different strategies, all the different approaches, the resources, which materials and resources do we use. So that's what I do with my teachers. I also I'm also involved in their teaching practice, so observing them in the classroom, etc., giving them feedback. But we also bring in, and I think we've got quite an interesting team here at the university. A team was interested in going beyond just the linguistic aspect of English. So it's not just about teaching the colours. That picture book that I mentioned is actually about mixing colours, which is actually about mixed marriages. And, those wonderful children that are born out of these mixed marriages. So, the blue and the green will create the wonderful little purple baby who has different cultures and different languages. So that's actually also one of the important aspects of what we do here. So the intercultural learning. And I integrate, so my interest in multilingualism, I think if anybody out there knows me, they'll know that's my main interest is multilingualism. And I integrate multilingual practices into my teaching so that the teachers, yes, they're learning how to teach English, but every once in a while they will be confronted with a different language in the classroom, or with strategies, for example, where there will be intercomprehension strategies. So they're looking at two languages, they're very similar. What strategies can you use to understand a language that you don't know at all? looking at, comparing languages, both at a grammatical level, at a vocabulary level. So I integrate those strategies into my teaching, but then I've also created a course on multilingualism, which is great. So we can actually have a full module on multilingualism, where our students are then, are exposed to the theories of multilingualism. How do you define multilingualism? How does one engage both the teachers and the students with their own multilingualism? Because I think very often individuals think that they are a speaker of a language and they forget all the other languages that they know to different degrees. And then what are the strategies you can use in the classroom? And also I think the important thing is when to use them. It's just not which strategies, is knowing when to use them. Because, we need to admit we're teaching English. That's our focus. But when can we use these multilingual strategies? So if the teachers have a bag full of these multilingual goodies, they can go in and take, I can do this here. I can bring in that language, or I can, just invite children's languages into this activity for this reason. So teachers need to know why they're doing it as well as what they're doing. So that's what I do here. And of course, we use lots of children's literature. That's the other aspect of my teaching, both with children and with teachers, that underpins a lot of what I do.
Well, so I wanted to ask, how do we define, or how do you define, like, bilingualism, trilingualism, multilingualism? Does it mean that you're equally fluent in all of the languages, or does it have a different meaning?
I think people define it differently, and I think it really does depend very much on how your perspective. Now, when I work with my teachers, I want them to embrace their own multilingualism. So I use a much wider definition of multilingualism. It's basically looking at your repertoires. What is your language repertoire? And it can include, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 languages. Those languages that you have learned and you are fluent in and you use on a daily basis, languages that you've learned and forgotten or not used on a daily basis, languages that you know because they are close to another language, like Norwegian and Swedish, for example. So Swedish and Danish always come up as languages that my students would have in their language repertoire. If I was in Portugal, Spanish would probably come up as a language that you have in your repertoire. So I use a very wide, quite a loose definition of multilingualism, but for a particular reason. Very often, multilingualism is used to describe equal proficiency in 2 or 3 languages. It doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. It's you need to have access and exposure to those 2 languages, but equal access and exposure to those 2 languages for you to be what we call perfectly bilingual. So no one is really ever perfectly bilingual because you don't function. It's very rare that you function equally in 2 languages, that you have access to different domains of your life equally in 2 languages. And I'm saying 2 languages as bilingualism because when multilingualism becomes much more, I like calling it messy, because it's just, you keep adding languages. You don't need to be fluent in more than 2 or 3 languages in life and, in your particular context. So, so I think we need to, the definitions vary, but I think we need to be very careful of the extremes. That is, one extreme is, being perfect bilinguals or having, high level proficiency in 2 languages, and therefore ignoring everything else, all the other languages you speak. And then the other, I suppose the other extreme would be, knowing, and I can say, I learned Hebrew once upon a time. I still remember Manishma. What does that make me? I had that experience. It's one of the languages in my repertoire. Yes, I'm multilingual, but and it's also contextual.
Well, I was going to ask, so in the Norwegian context, in the context where you're working, is it bilingual, trilingual? I mean, certainly I assume it's more than just monolingual.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's once again really interesting when you do, because I always give my students an activity where they engage with the multilingualism in a very visual manner, and the comments are always, I didn't actually see myself as multilingual, and suddenly they realize they've got Norwegian and English, they understand Swedish and Danish. Then they've all had some kind of foreign language at school, either French, Spanish, or German. Some of them have spent like study abroad or study abroad in the Netherlands. So they also have Dutch. And when they start considering all of that, it's sort of it's one of those aha moments. I'm actually multilingual. And it's really so important for teachers to put that multilingual spotlight on themselves and not just on the students. I think we always have that spotlight. Oh, look at my class is full of multilingual children and my class is multilingual. Okay, but if you turn that spotlight on yourself, you say, oh, wait a minute, I also know a couple of languages. So, so I think it's really, so that's what I do. That's how I start the whole process. So even here in Norway, where English, I mean, you could probably say that most people are English, Norwegian, bilingual to different degrees. They are all very comfortable speaking English. They very easily switch to English. They have a lot of exposure to the English language, like on television, etc. English and Norwegian are very close languages. They are the same family, and obviously we know of the Norse influence of English. And yet you still have these individuals thinking of themselves as Norwegian speakers. And they need an activity, the one that I use with my students, to actually realize, make them, or make it more concrete, the fact that they actually are multilingual.
Wow. Yeah, that's true. Actually, it's very interesting, like how this shift from monolingual being the only way of teaching, and the methodology was English only, and the pendulum now has swung completely the other way, and it's embracing bringing in a multitude of languages. Are you working on anything interesting at the moment? Do you have any interesting projects in the pipeline?
Oh, I've got two projects I'm really enjoying, I have to admit. One of them is IATEFL, and that is a project, it's an Erasmus Plus project, where we are looking at picture books, using picture books in the primary English language classroom to develop intercultural citizenship education. And I think both interculturality and the citizenship education is really important in today's world, and we've got so many wonderful young people out there actually, leading the pack, if you want. And we can talk about Greta Tunberg, for example. I think she's an icon, and she did say that you are never too small to make a difference. So and there are some wonderful picture books nowadays coming out that do have a very specific focus on citizenships and what being a citizen is about, and on encouraging children to take action. So the project we're working on, the IATEFL project, is actually so we've got a wonderful list of books, and the teachers working on the project have actually learned to create materials with an intercultural and citizenship theme. And those ice packs, we call them ice kits, are now available actually on the website. So if you just go into IATEFL, you will actually see some of those ice kits. So that's one project I'm working on. Another one is a project on looking at in-depth learning, or reading, in-depth learning through in-depth reading. Basically, once again, very much focused on literature, and so we're developing a framework to help teachers, integrate more in-depth reading, as opposed to just the surface level comprehension questions kind of thing. How much more? And I think one of the important elements here is criticality. How can you teach children to read critically? That's very important. And just coming out of those two, this is my own personal project. I'm really interested in dual language picture books now, of course, because of the multilingual aspects. I'm also working on projects, trying to develop how can we integrate dual language picture books into ELT. So keeping myself very busy.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. It sounds absolutely fantastic. And something that I noticed in your research interests is children's voices. And I wanted to ask, what does that mean? Is this pronunciation, or what do you mean by that?
Well, that's very much based on the UNCRC, so United Nations Children's Rights Convention, right? So children's rights. Children have, there are about, 40 something rights of children. One of them is actually the right for children to give their opinion, the right for children to have a voice, the right for children to contribute to their own lives, to the way they want to live their lives, and to the way they want to learn. And that's basically what I say we because I've also been working quite a lot with my other colleagues, and we just brought out a chapter, myself and Gail Ellis, on how do teachers view the child. So it's also how teachers view the child. Is the child someone who you talk to, who you give orders to, or is a child a partner? How do you encourage a child to participate in the learning process? How do you encourage a child to have a voice, to give an opinion about how they feel about an activity, about why they liked it or not, and to be able to actually reflect and then express their feelings about what they're doing in the classroom? That's, I think, and also even in research as well, I like the work that Anna Maria Pinter another book that's just come out on researching with children. How do you allow children to be part of the research process? So you're doing research with them, not just on them. So I think those are areas that I'm interested in as well. So it's giving the children a voice in how they learn or want to learn.
Well, and again, this is a complete shift almost in teaching, which has gone from just regurgitating and not having your own thoughts to this more in-depth critical reading and giving children voices, which I suppose leads us quite nicely to the fact that you are giving the opening plenary on Tuesday, the 17th. Without giving too much away, can you give us a little taster of what we can expect?
Well, I mean, I think I think one of the important things about this plenary, number one, is that it is a plenary. It is actually, you've got young learners, a focus on young learners as a plenary. And I think I'm going to make the most of that because young learners have, the whole young learner teaching has always been a sort of poor cousin of ELT, always pegged onto adult methodologies and second language acquisition methodologies as opposed to child language acquisition methodologies, for example. That's just one example of how I'm going to structure the plenary. I think it's more the importance of how can we focus on the child as a language learner, but as an individual language learner. So how can we bring in how can English language learning should be an area in itself, and we should be training teachers for teaching children, but with the right methodologies, etc. So I'm going to be looking at that, those areas, but also what happens today. Well, this is 2022, post-COVID, the world is a completely different place. Where do we stand with teaching languages and teaching English to our young children? So there we go. That's what I'm going to do.
To find out the answers, we should definitely come and see your plenary. Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, no, that sounds, it's fascinating. It really is. The whole teach younger learners bilingualism or multilingualism, multiliteracy. It's a very interesting area. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to the opening plenary. Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you, obviously, a very important question, and that is, if you could bring back any fashion item, what would it be?
Okay, that's super important.
Yes.
Well, actually, I off with them. Am I missing out? I'm wearing this shirt. It's so big.
I was going to say the 70s.
So 17. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just love that. So, and I just love the bell bottoms, and they are actually coming back. So I thought, oh, that style, I love those style, the prints, the bell bottoms. And then I was not young enough to really enjoy them. I was still a child. So bring them back so I can put them on.
Absolutely. Do you know what? You could give your plenary in your 70s gear. That would be fantastic.
My 70s gear.
Oh, absolutely. Do you know what? That's my era too. So I'm totally with you on this. I can't wait to see it. This is brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to us this afternoon. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And goodbye. See you at Belfast.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Sean, we can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. See you in Belfast wearing my 70s clothes.
Yay.
I'll be there.
I could see people making notes about themed plenaries now behind the scenes.
I think it's a great idea.
So thank you both very much for joining us. It's a really fascinating conversation. I am finding these Meet the Plenary speakers are just so fascinating, just to find out a little bit more about what's going on, the research and the ideas. And that was really, really interesting. I can't wait to see you in Belfast and hear your plenary. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to drop you out the stream now so you can relax. Thank you. Thank you. Brilliant. Thanks to them both. I really hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. As I say, I find them so fascinating what we can learn in a short period of time when we're meeting these speakers, and I very much hope that it has whetted your appetite for the opening plenary in Belfast, which as we were saying is just over 30 odd days away now on May the 17th. And I'm sure you don't need me to remind you, but I will, that if you haven't yet signed up for conference, then you need to do so by May the 5th. So you've got a couple of weeks left to do that. And IATEFL Belfast is going to be from the 17th to the 20th of May. And remember, the 16th of May, the day before, there are the pre-conference events. And if you want to find out more about the pre-conference events and more about the conference and the other speakers, then look through the Facebook page, which we're broadcasting to now, and you'll see lots of interviews that have taken place over the last couple of weeks and more information there. And of course, you can go to the conference page of the IATEFL website. And why you want to go there as well is because the program is now available, and you'll be able to see in detail what is happening at the IATEFL conference if you go to conference.iatefl.org. And that's it. Thank you so much again for joining us today for the live stream. We will be, I think we're going to have a week off next week, and then we'll be back with a couple more live streams running into the conference. You're finding out more detail. We're going to do some things about the social program and tell you some other aspects of conference that will be coming up. So do join us again in a week or so's time for those. Until then, stay safe. Thank you very much for joining us, and see you next time.